Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Movie Screeners Club podcast. I'm your host, Sophia Falk. The Movie Screeners Club is brought to you by Designing Hollywood Productions, in association with Gardena Cinema. If you want to win the chance to have your short film screened in a huge theater and the opportunity to be interviewed on our podcast, please submit your film today on our website, themoviescreenersclub.com.
My name is Jahanshah Vafaeisefat. I wrote and directed The Painter. It's a short film about a former championship boxer who also happens to paint. He has to reconcile with his granddaughter who is trying to make a documentary about him. It's an emotional film. It's rooted, I think, in a lot of real emotion, and I think you can see that pop off on screen. We really took our time to make sure that the visuals and the performances and everything come together so that the audience can get sucked into the story.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an emotional story. It's so dramatic. How do you write something that's so emotional? How do you even start?
This was quite a long project. When the pandemic happened, we were working on something else, and that fell through just because of the pandemic being what it was around, a few years ago. It was still pretty rough. So we weren't sure what to do. And my brother, who's a producer on the film, told me about this actor that was working on another project that he was helping out with, who's our lead, Raymond J. Barry. And, I saw what he did on the set for that project. I really liked him. I really wanted to work with him. And when I heard that uh, he's the kind of guy that gets up really early in the morning, stays in shape. He goes like 400 punches on a heavy bag every morning at the gym. It's crazy. This guy is ripped. But he told me that he's also this really abstract painter. And if you go on his website, and I've seen some of the paintings in his workshop, it's quite moving to see that this guy who's an actor who's also really athletic. He used to play football when he was younger in college, I believe. Was also really in touch with something that I didn't quite expect, and I think that something really clicked in me, that there was this duality in him, that this guy is both very fit, physically, but also in tune emotionally with painting. And I'd never seen anything like that before in a film. And so the whole thing was written with him in mind. It was really tuned specifically for him. There was no one else I wanted for this role. But a lot of the deep emotional um, sort of structure of the story came from a very personal place. All my films are really personal. And this was really rooted in the difficulties I had when I was younger, especially in film school, trying to get projects off the ground. I'm sure many young filmmakers can relate to that struggle of trying to get your name out there, trying to work on something with people. Things do not go well at all. Uh, your shoots aren't perfect. You're trying to shoot in a location within 3 hours before they have to kick you out, and all this stuff. But you also reach a point where, at least I think for me, you start to question what's going on and what's happening, because you're young, you don't know, where this journey will take you. And I really wanted to make a film that spoke to that process, that spoke to the artistic process, really a tribute to the artistic process and the power of creativity and art, the healing power of that. Because both of these characters in the film, Pat, played by Raymond J. Barry, and Jesse, played by Jesse Ridnor, they are both creative people. They're both stuck in a place, and yet they couldn't be further apart. Generationally, emotionally, it seems like they have no common ground, and yet through the power of art, through the little push that Pat gives Jesse, we find that they both kind of come together, and they both realize that the power of art and the power of creativity is extremely important. In this film, it happens to be sort of a combination of painting and a little bit of filmmaking, just to kind of give it a little bit of that personal touch that I really, really wanted. But to me, that was really the core of the story, where it came from, persisting even when all hope is lost.
Yeah, I think that's such an important quality for a filmmaker to have, but it's a quality for everybody to have. How do you approach Raymond J. Barry and say, listen, you got a great story and I want to make you cry. So I'm going to write about your life and you're going to act in it. How do you even bring that up with somebody and say, you're my muse, but I'm going to make it sad?
Those early meetings were quite interesting.
Mhm.
I think the funny thing is that when we were writing this, when I was putting pen to paper, I didn't tell Ray that we were doing this. It was sort of I wanted to kind of have everything ready to go before we discussed it with him. And when he read the script, there was a few things that we had put in there. We cut out. There was a scene that I wanted to do where he had a heavy bag, but we changed it later on.
Mhm.
In the original, there was a draft where he was punching a heavy bag, kind of like how you see in the film where he's punching the dummy, just basically the same scene. And when he read that, he said, "How did you know that I do that? I've never met you, and yet you know that I do this." And he was really taken by that this small detail. He really spoke to him, I think, as an actor. He's a wonderful actor. He's been in so many films, but I wanted to give him the chance to really have his moment, because he has the strength to carry that. He has a wonderful quietness. He has an incredible face on camera, and I think the fact that it's about painting, the fact that it sort of spoke to him on those sort of those small levels of the kind of the athleticism that he has. Uh, it was not that hard to convince him to really do this. He was really on board from the get-go, and I'm so happy that he was, because it allowed us to fill out our cast and allowed us to find the crew that we needed, and everyone did a fantastic job on the film. So he was almost the first and last piece. It was is like, you're here, and now we can kind of take a breath and continue on with our work and find everyone else that we need. So it was quite a beautiful thing.
Mhm. Is it important for you as a filmmaker to have your actors also bring something personal to the table just as you are?
Yes, absolutely. I find my process to be very collaborative.
Mhm.
And, for me, I'm already putting a lot of personal energy into this. I want everyone, cast and crew, to bring a part of themselves into it. The character of Jessie, I wanted her to have a kind of spark. And when I had met Jessie and I saw her audition and we had discussed it, I decided, this character is going to be named after you, because I think it'll bring something, almost unconsciously personal. And I think that it really shines through. And even with my crew, like my DP, Akash Raj, he did a fantastic job. And I think there was a lot that he got to play around with this that I don't think he normally gets to do. We were really trying to make sure that he had the freedom to do what he wanted, within the bounds of this is what we are trying to do. But I wanted to make sure that him and his camera crew were able to really fire on all cylinders, because I knew, what he could bring was really magical, and you can see it in the way the film is shot. And he understood the story I was going for, and I think it turned out beautifully. So I think I almost demand that you have to bring something to the table of yourself, because filmmaking is a truly collaborative art. You can't do it by yourself. It's not like, I'm going to learn guitar by myself. I'm going to go just write a book by myself. It's not possible to do this on your own, to tell us, especially tell a story like this on your own. So every director needs a fantastic cast and crew. I'm no exception to that. Um, I just want to make sure that when you're on one of my projects, that you bring yourself, because every little personal touch in each part of the film makes it a much bigger, grander whole, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it really does show. It's so personal, and there you can definitely tell, like, the little touches, like, the care that went into telling a story like this, and I'm wondering, when you are trying to drive that emotion out of your audience, where do you start? Are you starting with the shot list? Like, you know that you want this wide shot that'll evoke this emotion of loneliness or something like that, or are you starting with the dialogue, or are you starting with maybe the color or the sound? Where does your head kind of go when you're writing?
I think that when you're writing, it's a little bit of thinking of almost the script as just a document in and of itself,
Mhm.
with sort of the shots in mind, but making sure that the script itself works, the dialogue itself works. It took a lot of tweaking. It took many, many months of tweaking to get it to the point where, excuse me, that uh, Ray's character Pap especially hit the notes that we wanted, and we found that having him be the kind of character that actually speaks very little proved to be the most powerful, and I think proved to be our most valuable asset. He speaks in a very laconic way. He kind of has that Spartan touch where he will really just not waste a single breath. And we wanted that sort of in the script, really from the get-go, so that when we're on set, that could kind of come through, because we want to make sure the actors' performances are as I'd imagine, but with whatever they bring to the table, so that we have the kind of free reign on the set to make those adjustments. I think emotion is a really powerful thing in a film, but hard to execute. I think you need to have everything in mind. I think you need to not only have a story that you feel is really powerful, but to make sure that the shots that you have evoke the same emotion. We shot the film in a very deliberate way. It wasn't really traditional coverage per se. We really wanted each shot to have its own story.
Mm.
In the sort of beginning scenes of the film, a lot of the blocking is telling a story. Pap is quite often framed by squares and frames, and to kind of really emphasize that he's sort of in this box, and there's a lot of negative space used. You see a lot of headroom very deliberately to kind of unsettle the audience and kind of draw them in, because your eye will naturally go to the top of the sort of top third of the frame, but we bring you down a little bit. So you have to kind of change your perspective on this story. And we chose the 1:3 aspect ratio very much on purpose, because I think that it evokes the feel of a painting in all the right ways. It's not just it framed close-ups beautifully. It's not just for the negative space, which it kind of, that almost even ratio kind of gets that negative space to feel almost right. But it's really that painterly feeling. And I think, an audience member is not going to sit there and think, oh, wow, that's the 4:3 aspect ratio. That's so, I mean, there's always going to be those those audience members out there. But, the vast majority of the audience doesn't think about that. It's a subconscious thing. But when I talk to people afterwards, they're like, oh, it was shot. They sort of think afterwards it was shot in that way. And then we talk about it, and they're like, oh, okay. They get it. So emotion, I think I think first and foremost, you have to be in touch with yourself emotionally. Let me say that. You have to be in touch with yourself emotionally. Um, Write a story that you believe in, and have, I think, rich visuals. I think it's really easy these days to kind of just, fix it in post. And I am not a big fan of that. Every shot matters. Every shot tells a story. An audience member watches a film one shot at a time. So you better have every shot that you craft, and I do mean craft, be as wonderful as possible. So I feel like that all comes together with emotion. And I think music and sound and everything, that's important too. But I think these are the most primary things to draw people in, so that they forget they're watching a movie and they think that they're just in the world.
And during pre-production, do you schedule the shoot around all of the shots that you want to get in? Like, you need to get every single shot that you have in mind. We need to do an extra day of shooting. Is that kind of always at the forefront?
Yeah, we had our shot list. Of course, production has to have a practical element to it, and we did have every shot listed out. I mean, my DP went through the script, and we had our sort of our ones that we needed, our sort of our wants, and then our sort of we're going to reach for this if we can. And we have enough wiggle room on the day to find sort of where inspiration takes us. There were a couple shots that we had not planned on, and we had some extra time, and we felt like, oh, okay, you know what? Let's just try and reach for this. But with this particular production, because we were working with Ray, his schedule's very tight. We were shooting only 3 days for this project, arguably 2.5 sort of depending on who you ask. And we had no opportunity to add an extra day. We had no opportunity for reshoots. We had to get everything that we wanted within that 3 days. We needed to make sure it was all within the shot list and to get our reaches and everything. So the practical nature of production means that scheduling is extremely crucial. We had a very difficult time through earlier drafts that had different locations trying to schedule things out. Once we had the script locked down, and we only really had 2 to 3 shooting locations to go to, we just made sure day 1 and 2 is here and day 3 is here, and it worked out beautifully. So we weren't able to film in order. I think ideally, a lot of people are very idealistic about trying to film in order for their actors. I think the truth of the matter is that production, especially at the independent level, means that you have to make every dollar count. And I think because production is a practical battle, to win the battle, you have to think practically and artistically at the same time. You have to have the brain for both. So making sure you get every shot you need and then reaching, I think, is super important. Scheduling is a lot tougher, I think, than people like to admit, especially for smaller productions. You have to make sure that your schedule works, because if one thing falls out of place, it's a lot of work to try and find the extra day. I've done films where we needed to keep adding extra days and keep adding extra days, and that's really, really rough. We knew for this, because we were working with somebody whose time is valuable. It forced us to work a certain way. I really think creative limitation allows you to come up with ingenious solutions. I think in our case, having Ray was a blessing, and it also made us step up our game, because this was an actor who has been on Hollywood productions and Hollywood sets. We wanted to respect his time and respect his skill. So for us, that was super important to make sure scheduling was tight, as tight as possible.
It's always so crucial, and you're always running out of time. It's like it's balancing the art and the practicality of all of it is really, really tough, and I think it'll always be tough for every filmmaker. Is this usually the genre that you kind of find yourself in, that you write for and direct?
I would say when I'm writing, I don't normally think about the genre immediately. So I just think about the inspiration and the story behind it. The painter is, I would say, it just follows the sort of drama genre box. If you want to put it in that box, I don't like boxes, but if you want to put it in the box, we'll put it in the box. Previous projects have been quite different. We've done more thriller type projects or sort of slice of life projects. For me, genre is not the important thing. The story is the important thing. But with this project, we knew from the get-go, this is simple. This is minimal. We don't want to do anything more than we can. We're not going to make this a drama and a neo-noir at the same time or something like that. So we figured, we understand the story is this, keep it here. I'm not married to the genre of drama, but I also love every genre of film. So I feel, in the past, I've done various genres. In the future, I would love to do other types of films. I don't see myself being limited by that. I love the art so much that I have favorite films in more or less every single genre. For me, it's about the story first and foremost.
On that note, thank you so much.
The Movie Screeners Club is produced by Designing Hollywood Productions in association with Gardena Cinema. If you want to win the chance to have your short film screened in a huge theater and the opportunity to be interviewed on our podcast, please submit your film today on our website, themoviescreenersclub.com. This episode was sponsored by Smokebreak Productions. Addictively entertaining.